It's good to see all of you here. The session will be recorded so you can look it at home. It's a thesis info session, which you have all been waiting for. And it's organized by Extramuros Academic Activities Committee. Present are, of course, our academic advisor Gino Spormans and two of our alumni, Edwin Alblas and Veronica Torozzo.
Yes.
They wrote a beautiful thesis themselves during their bachelor, and they are going to provide you with some information, some tips and tricks, and you can ask them some questions at the end of their presentations. So I would like to give the floor to Veronica.
Thank you. Okay, hello everybody. Today I would like to call my presentation How to Thesis, an Imperfect Guide for the Imperfect Student. So why did I choose this format for a presentation? And it's because I think that when we are about to write our thesis, we kind of look for the imperfect questions. We ask the wrong questions because we have this fear of our own capability. Can we write the thesis? And I think that everybody in this room is capable of writing a thesis because a thesis is just a paper. It's a paper that's just a little bit longer, and it's a paper where you just have more individual creativity. So everybody here can write a thesis, but the question is, why is it so hard to do it? And I was the student that always handed everything in on time. I was the student that always had everything super planned, and I think that my thesis was probably the biggest paper writing catastrophe, and it's retrospectively that I can tell you why and how to avoid making the same mistake. So, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Veronica Alberti. I was a liberal arts student from 2011 to 2014, and I majored in law. After that, I went on to do the Master's in International Law and Human Rights and the Research Master in Law here at the Law Faculty. And I am now in the process of writing another thesis myself. During my bachelor, I wrote this thesis. So it's called An Instrument of Exclusion, How Migration Law Affects Statelessness. For those of you that have taken the course on nationality, statelessness, and human rights, you know that the issue with statelessness is nationality law. Nationality law is an issue. Why is the nationality law an issue? How is the nationality law of every country? And for my thesis, I indirectly realized that actually migration law is also a problem. So sometimes the best way to give a unique contribution is to think quite literally outside the box. And that's hard to do when you've studied and specialized for 2 years in your major in either business or social science or law. So I think that a very good piece of advice is to take the time, step back and think, okay, but how would my fellow social science students look at this? Talk to them. Liberal arts is all about interdisciplinarity, and that can help you make a unique contribution on the topic when you're working on it. So why was this so hard for me to write? It's because the process went a little like this. I was convinced that I was too busy because I had 5 courses. I was convinced that I was too busy because I was doing an internship, or I was convinced that I was too busy to think about my thesis, and maybe if I wait for the ideal time to write my thesis, all the questions will fall out of the sky. That time never came, and 2 months before the deadline, I realized I wrote a chapter, but that's not enough, and what I started with is probably not such a good idea, so maybe I should just rewrite everything. By the time I knew what to rewrite, it was 1 month before the deadline. Why was I procrastinating so much? Because in the end, I say, oh no, it's logistically, or no, maybe I'll just wait for the reply of my supervisor. I'll just wait until the perfect moment to work on it. But in the end, it came down to one specific thing, which is procrastination. And last year, my advice to the liberal arts students was just don't make the same mistake as I did. Don't leave it till the last minute. But I didn't tell anybody how to overcome procrastination, why we procrastinate, how you can avoid it. And I only discovered this last week myself when going through a bunch of TED Talks. So the TED Talk that inspired me right now for this presentation was a TED Talk by Vic Nithi. He's a psychology student. He's also 20 years old and had raised and funded 3 companies by that age. So it's somebody who was a complete slacker and somehow decided to flip his life around and look at why he was procrastinating so much on everything he was doing. And let me say this, procrastinating is a very appealing thing to do when you're writing a thesis, because you can convince yourself that if it doesn't turn out well, or your grade was insufficient, or if then your supervisor doesn't respond to you in time, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't that you couldn't do it. It was just that the circumstances weren't in your favor. So are you going to be a victim of circumstance, or are you going to face the circumstances head on? And the first circumstance you need to deal with is your brain. So mind and brain, remember that? Yeah? Great. It works for something. It turns out that when you're having that internal argument in your head, I should get to work, versus, but what if I just watch another episode of Scandal? Or what if I watch the new episode of Game of Thrones? That is your frontal lobe and your limbic system fighting with each other. Your frontal lobe knows what you need to do. Your limbic system is your primitive instinct, it's your monkey brain, telling you what you want to do. But the reason your limbic system is running away from it is probably because of one of 3 reasons. So the first reason why we sometimes procrastinate is because we don't know where to start. For me, the thesis was this demon to slay. It was this, and actually it was just a paper. It is just a paper. So don't think of it as something else, because that's not what it is. It's a paper. You know how to write a paper. You know how to write an introduction. You know how to explain why you're going to look at a topic. You know why to look, or which methodology you're going to explain. Why am I going to look at treaties versus why am I going to do an empirical research versus why am I going to do interviews? And then you just need to execute it. Just go through the papers and do it. But the other thing is that then we dread the job. We dread that we need to work through it. We dread that we need to get into it. And then finally, this was the biggest issue for me, fear of failure. I was like, everybody's expecting me to write a great thesis. But if I don't, then what does that say about me? And I made it an issue of self-esteem. And that is not what your thesis is about. Your thesis is a paper. And just like everything we do in our work, that doesn't define who we are as a person. So if you realize this, you can start trying to tackle how to deal with procrastination. The first thing to do is to realize that this discussion is happening in your head. That when you're considering whether to go to work or not, sometimes it's not you thinking it, it's not the rational part of your brain, the frontal cortex, but sometimes it's the primitive system. So whenever you feel that dread, just push through it by establishing goals for yourself. So by this week, I need to have a proposal done. So which days of the week am I going to put into it? Well, I have a lot of lectures on Monday and Thursday, so I'm going to work on it on Friday. But then I need to talk to my supervisor. So if I really want to talk to my supervisor, maybe I should work on it on Tuesday and Wednesday so that on Friday I could go to my supervisor, right? Resources. It's really fun to open up your laptop, but you don't go to get your books. And then when you get up to go get the thing you're missing, you kind of fall into a different rhythm. So what I started doing was I would grab all the books I need, all the articles I need, I would download them all into my computer, I would turn off the Wi-Fi, and then I would start working. Once I collected all the articles, once I had all the literature in front of me, because if every time you need to look for something, you're going to stand up or you're going to go open a tab, there's a lot of chance that you're going to open the other tab and type F, and then auto search. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. So get all your resources and then just shut down the internet. Or lock yourself up in the library. Then visualize the process. So what I recommend everybody to do is always mind map. That works for me, but other people work more in like vertical structures, but actually make sure you have the whole process of what you need to do written down. After that, it's, plan in distractions. So say, okay, if I worked all Wednesday on my thesis, then Wednesday night I'm going to party. Wednesday night I'm going to go to a movie with my friends. Because what we tend to do also is hold ourselves in and isolate ourselves from the world, because we think, well, if I see somebody else, maybe I'm not working. But then we end up procrastinating at home in a dissatisfactory way by just scrolling through other people's lives, seeing how everybody else is partying, and just thinking like, I need to write my thesis, and typing to people, oh, I'm working on my thesis, while you're not, you're on Facebook. The moment you tell somebody I'm working on my thesis, on Facebook, you're not working on your thesis. So, and when people tell you that, and when your friends tell you that, tell them get off Facebook, you're not doing shit, okay? We are each other's procrastination monitors. This is what it means to have a system you can rely on and a group of friends you can rely on. And then the last thing is failure. Prepare for failure. What do I mean with prepare for failure? It doesn't mean you're actually going to fail. It doesn't mean you're actually not going to finish your thesis. It means that when you feel like an idea is running away from you, just keep pushing through. When you feel like, I don't know how to solve this issue, don't say, okay, I'll work on something else. Just keep pushing until you solve that one issue. Usually when it gets hard is when we want to run away. And that's just going to keep you up at night. If you stop chasing the ideas, then at night it's going to keep you up. And then you're just going to have stress dreams or whatever. Again, this doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. Maybe somebody's like, I can conquer the thesis, no problem. I commend you. This is an imperfect guide for the imperfect student. So finally, the best thesis is a finished thesis. So keep that in mind. Don't think I'm going to start and I'm going to work on it all through the summer and I'm going to miss graduation just to finish my thesis. I envy the person that had their thesis finished by April, because that person had their thesis finished. So just make sure you deal with that by using these tips. You guys can have the presentation online or watch the TED Talk. That helped me a lot, because sometimes that's the biggest issue. You guys can all write this, but nonetheless, I'm open to questions if you want any advice on the process or on questions about how I did mine. I can also just give you more details on that. I just didn't want to focus it too much. Any questions?
Yeah, let's do this.
I think I have like 10 more minutes in my allotted time, so I can answer any question you have. So what are you uncertain about? Because maybe I didn't even address that. Because you might have a completely different problem right now. So are there any things you guys are struggling with? Yeah?
I finally found a supervisor and I had an idea of a topic, but then my supervisor said, before we meet, can you send me a summary with a legal question?
Yeah.
While I was not really planning on turning this into like a legal kind of thing. So now I'm super confused, because on the one hand I don't want to lose my supervisor because I had so much trouble finding one in the first place.
Yeah.
But then again, I feel like she's going to change what I want to write about, because all of a sudden she threw this term of legal question at me and I was like, oh, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. So
well, I guess an advice I could give you from a
I know
research master, which is inspired by Edwin. Edwin wrote an empirical research about how law PhD students are more likely to get hired, yes or no, if they did a research master program. The legal question, it was about lawyers. The topic is about law, but the question doesn't need to be technically legal. So as long as you have a legal topic, you can show why, as long as you can show her why it's interesting to look at it from a different way, I think that that is more than enough for a proposal. So don't think of also like a social topic as solely something that can be addressed from a sociological perspective. So as long as you have a good legal topic and you can frame why it's an issue and why maybe looking at the law alone from a black letter law approach is not enough, and you can look at social sciences to answer that. And that works. That's what I'm doing in my thesis right now. I want to look at international relations theory, because human rights scholars don't have an explanation to why people follow the law or not. So I'm going to bring in another discipline. But it's an issue from human rights, because if you care about human rights becoming realized, then you should look at that. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I just have issues with finding a topic in general.
Yeah.
Because I had a topic proposal and I got denied because it was too broad.
Yeah.
And they told me that in order to specify it, it would have to become too specific.
Yeah. What do you study? What's your major?
Business management.
Business management. What was the idea that you had that was too broad?
I wanted to study, write about differences in buying behavior between men and women.
Okay.
And that was too broad. They told me to specify that.
Yes.
And then we looked at specifying that, but that got so specific you can fill a full thesis about it. And I have to come up with a completely new
Do
topic.
you want to do an empirical research, or do you want to? Yeah. So you want to empirically research this? What is something that students buy? You can look at the buying subscription at the university between female and male students. Why does a gender buy more subscriptions? Do they buy more subscriptions? Maybe ask them for a register anonymized. If more men than women are registered, but how many people are more active? So if you just maybe reframe it to something you can do here, because you can't look at the whole world, right? But you can make it just broad enough to be able to realize it at the university. So I don't know if that helps you at all. But yeah. Yeah.
To be honest, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Okay.
I was in the background track thesis group because I got really stressed out because I was like, hello.
Yeah.
And then this one guy was talking about subscribing for he's studying something else.
Yeah.
He was just telling this woman who was arranging the background track thesis thing that he needed to subscribe again for his thesis, and I just sat there like, what are you talking about?
There's a
Do I need to do that?
There's a
or-
SPIPC dossier, which is where you register automatically to get a thesis. And the law faculty and other faculties, you don't go and pick your supervisor. You need to submit a proposal online in a digital database, and then the supervisor picks you. Liberal arts students are different. So you don't need to worry about that. Literally, we are. It's just, it's one of the advantages, so you don't need to worry about that. I'm worried about that because I need to submit my proposal by the 1st of March. And that's it. I don't have another chance to submit one.
But
But
do I
that's-
need to submit
no.
a proposal?
You need to talk with your supervisor. So you work
That's all.
one-on-one with your supervisor, yeah. Your supervisor, after they give you a grade, will enter you into the system themselves, or Gabi will do that. But you don't